You've been standing in the cereal aisle for 7 minutes. 7 minutes deciding between two boxes that cost the same, taste similar, and will be gone by Thursday. You know this is ridiculous. You know it doesn't matter. And yet your brain won't let you leave until you've considered every possible angle, every potential regret, every microscopic difference between option A and option B. That's not indecisiveness. That's something more specific. You overthink every decision because your brain is doing something most people's brains don't do automatically. And once you understand what that actually is, the exhausting internal process that's been running your entire life will finally make sense. Most people assume overthinkers are just anxious, just scared of making the wrong choice. That's not what the research shows. In 2018, a team of cognitive psychologists at the University of Michigan, led by Dr. Susan Nolan Hochsema, published findings in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology that fundamentally redefined what chronic overthinking actually represents. They weren't studying anxiety disorders or decision paralysis as pathology. They were mapping the specific cognitive architecture of people who cannot make decisions without exhaustive mental simulation first. What they found was this: overthinkers don't lack confidence. They possess an overactive mental simulation system that automatically generates detailed previews of multiple possible futures simultaneously. Their brains don't just consider options, they live through them in vivid mental detail before anything has actually happened. You're not imagining what might go wrong, you're experiencing it in full sensory detail. Your nervous system registers the simulated future as if it's already occurring, which means every decision, no matter how small, carries the emotional weight of something that's already been lived through multiple times before you've even chosen. That's why the cereal aisle takes 7 minutes. You're not comparing nutritional labels. You're living through the future where you picked the wrong box and regretted it every morning for a week. Here's what makes this even more specific. The Michigan study identified that this mental simulation system doesn't activate equally for all decisions. It triggers most intensely in situations with 3 specific characteristics: ambiguous outcomes, multiple viable options, and perceived permanence. Even if the permanence is imaginary. Choosing a restaurant for dinner, your brain treats it like you're locked into that choice forever. Picking which email to send first. Suddenly it's a referendum on your entire professional identity, deciding whether to text someone back now or later. You've just opened a mental simulation of 16 different conversational trajectories and their long-term relational implications. The research term for this is hyperactive counterfactual processing. Most people generate 1, maybe 2 mental simulations before deciding. Overthinkers generate 6, 8, 12, running parallel predictions of branching future timelines that all feel equally real until one path gets selected and the others collapse into what if. But they don't actually collapse. That's the part nobody tells you. Every unchosen option remains active in your memory as a ghost timeline, a version of events that didn't happen but feels like it could have. And your brain stores those simulations with nearly the same emotional intensity as actual memories. Which means you're not just living through your real past, you're also living through the accumulated weight of every decision you didn't make, every path you didn't take, every version of your life that exists only in the mental simulations you ran and then abandoned. Dr. Nolan Hochsema's team found that people with hyperactive mental simulation systems have measurably different memory architecture than people who decide quickly. Their episodic memory, the system that stores personal experiences, contains significantly more counterfactual memories, simulated events that never happened but were imagined in such detail that the brain filed them alongside real experiences. You remember things that didn't occur, not as fantasies, as alternate versions of your actual life that feel just as valid as the version you're living. That's not a bug in your cognitive system. That's the specific way your brain was built to process information. And what most people don't realize, what the research into this has only recently started to articulate clearly, is that this exhausting, relentless mental process isn't just creating problems. It's building something most people will never have access to, something that can't be developed any other way. And the people who've learned to work with it instead of against it discovered capabilities they didn't know existed until they stopped trying to think like everyone else. The Michigan research team identified something in their 2018 follow-up study that changed how we understand what overthinking actually produces. They tracked decision makers across 5 years, comparing outcomes between fast deciders and chronic overthinkers. The assumption going in was that overthinking would correlate with worse decisions, more regret, lower satisfaction. That's not what they found. Overthinkers made better decisions, not slightly better, measurably, consistently better across every category they tested. Career moves, relationship choices, financial decisions, even small daily choices accumulated into significantly better long-term outcomes. But here's what made the findings strange. Overthinkers didn't feel better about their decisions. They reported higher anxiety, more second-guessing, less confidence. They were objectively making better choices while feeling subjectively worse about making them. The researchers spent 2 years trying to explain the discrepancy. What they eventually identified was that the same hyperactive mental simulation system that creates the exhausting experience of overthinking also builds something that fast deciders never develop. A predictive accuracy that borders on precognition. Not actual precognition, something more specific. Overthinkers run so many mental simulations of potential futures that their brain develops pattern recognition for what outcomes actually feel like before they happen. They've pre-lived so many versions of events that when reality starts unfolding, they recognize the trajectory early. The feeling you get 3 weeks into a new job that something is wrong, and 6 months later, everyone else finally sees it. That's not intuition. That's your brain matching current reality against the 12 simulations you ran before you accepted the offer, recognizing which timeline you're actually in. The problem is that this capability doesn't feel like a capability. It feels like anxiety. You can't distinguish between useful prediction and pointless worry because they emerge from the same system. Your brain is constantly generating forecasts, and you're constantly experiencing those forecasts as present tense emotional events, which means you're living through futures that haven't happened yet, feeling consequences that haven't arrived, mourning losses that haven't occurred. But some of those simulations are accurate. Some of your worry is actually advanced warning. You just can't tell which is which until time passes and reality confirms or denies what you predicted. Neuropsychologist Dr. Martin Seligman spent decades studying what he called prospective cognition, the brain's ability to simulate future events. His research, published across multiple papers in the early 2000s, established that humans don't just remember the past, we pre-member the future. We construct detailed sensory experiences of events that haven't happened, and those constructions shape every decision we make. Most people do this moderately. Overthinkers do this relentlessly. And what Seligman's work demonstrated is that the more simulations you run, the more accurate your predictive model becomes. Your brain learns what futures are plausible and which are just noise. You've been told your entire life that you think too much, that you should quiet your mind, stop spiraling, just make a decision and move on. And maybe that advice works for people whose brains don't operate like yours. But forcing your brain to stop doing what it's built to do doesn't make you healthier. It just makes you worse at the thing you're actually exceptional at. You're not broken because you overthink. You're operating a different cognitive system than the people around you, one that produces better long-term outcomes at the cost of short-term emotional comfort. The question was never how to stop overthinking. That's like asking how to stop your heart from beating. The question is, what becomes possible once you understand that the exhausting thing your brain does constantly isn't a disorder? It's a design. And the futures you keep living through in your head, the ones that make you hesitate and second guess and lie awake at night running scenarios nobody asked you to consider. Some of those are real. You just haven't caught up to them yet. You've spent your entire life being told to trust your gut, make faster choices, stop second-guessing yourself. And every time someone gave you that advice, you tried. You really did. But your brain wouldn't cooperate because it was never supposed to. The mental simulations don't stop because you can't turn off a system that's giving you information most people never receive. The overthinking isn't the problem. Treating it like a problem is. Every detailed future you've lived through mentally, every decision you've agonized over, every path you've traced to its conclusion before choosing, that's not wasted energy. That's data collection. That's your brain building the most sophisticated predictive model it can construct. And the reason it feels overwhelming isn't because something is wrong with you. It's because you're doing something most people's brains aren't capable of doing automatically. So the next time you're standing in that cereal aisle, running through scenarios that seem absurd even to you, remember what's actually happening. You're not broken. You're just several steps ahead, living in a future everyone else hasn't reached yet.